What they call a rainfall simulator. And so what we did is we actually took these soil samples and you try to get different vegetative cover. So, and we tried to keep the soil type similar. So these were all taken from Lake of the Woods County. So here, we actually ran this at the county fair a couple weeks ago. So we saved the samples, but this was it's an Fe loam from the Grayston area, sort of close to Tom's other grazing operation. And so this has been rotationally grazed for 5 years, so it has more soil root structure in the soil. And this is kind of what you referred to as kind of that sacrificed area, but you called it something else.
Opportunity area.
Opportunity area. So this was actually, it had less cover on it, and actually after we ran that, it grew a little bit more. And then this was just kind of a fallow area, and you can see, you know, it's dry, kind of like all of Minnesota right now with the cracks in there. And then we also had this soybeans. It's on a little bit lighter soil, but you know, there's also some. It was ryegrass, I believe, the year before, so there's some residue on there. And this is a ryegrass field. So with that, we have kind of the differing covers that we collected, you know, and all, you know, fairly loam soils, either silt loam to fine sandy loam. So,
yeah, very good. So we can go ahead, Tom, why don't you turn on the power first, get that head going, and then turn on the water. There we go, now turn on the water. So while this is running, we're going to put about 1 inch of water on here to simulate a 1 inch rainfall. And I'd like you to watch a couple things. Watch, first of all, the jars you see hanging in front there. That's an indication of runoff. There are also some jars behind that white board we'll look at later. That will be an indication of infiltration. Also watch what's going on that splash board on the back and see what's going on. I'm getting a shower here myself. How many have seen a rainfall simulator before? A couple people have, okay? Extremely interesting. It has kind of taken some of the myths we've lived with in the conservation world for the last 60, 70 years and really raised some questions on the value of some of these things. And it's really illustrated the power of our management and what it can mean for hydrology and water quality and water management on the landscape. Because water management really does, water quality really does begin on the landscape. What we do does matter. And this is a very powerful way of illustrating that. So we're going to let that sprinkle here for a little bit. And it's sprinkling now.
And you can see that there are rain gauges on there. So usually when you get to about 1 inch of rain, you can see kind of where that mark is on the rain gauges. That's when, you know, that's about how long it takes to really see this simulation work.
We're just going to let it go here a few minutes and you can watch what happens. Then we're going to discuss what's going on. Starting to see some runoff accumulate in the jars, hanging in the front there. These pans are about 2.5 inches deep. It's quite a process to get these samples out. These are hammered in the ground. The bottom of these pans are perforated, so it allows water to infiltrate through it. And being dry, it was a lot more work, I would imagine, getting these samples out. So
yeah, some of the field staff in the Lake of the Woods SWCD office assisted with that. I did not actually, but they actually say to use like a sawzall, and that ran the battery dead really quick. So then they used an electric chainsaw, which wasn't good for the bar and chain, but as dry as it was, it's a very difficult process. But typically you take the samples, and then you let it dry for a week or two, or about a week. But in this case, we did not have to let it wait to dry. They were plenty dry as is.
Well, there's just a little bit of slope on these. Don't have a lot of slope in the counties around here, not like southeast Minnesota, but there is some. So there's a little bit of slope on here, demonstrating that there can be some runoff. Look at the back board there. What are you seeing on the back splash board there? Are you seeing anything going on? Are you seeing some of these samples? There's some soil showing up on that splash board on the back. Yeah, that's definitely some splash. There are some folks, a lot of soybeans grown in this area. There's some folks that feel that soil splash is something that triggers disease in soybeans, like white mold syndrome, from bouncing those spores up onto the stem. And you can see here that could certainly be a possibility as a way to transfer that disease, which is a spore-borne soil. It's held in the soil up and bounce it up onto the plant. I'm going to be getting where we at now. About an inch on the right rain gauge there. Yeah, let's call that good, Tom, and shut the water off, then we'll shut the power off.
And the wind is moving some of the collection. You can see some of that is moved a little bit and isn't collecting in the basins 100%.
So let's take a look here and see what we got for runoff. And I think we'll just pop these off. I may not be able to use the microphone here. So if we go to where our ryegrass is, we've got a lot of cover here. It's intercepting, that cover is intercepting some of the velocity of that raindrop as it strikes the vegetation here. And so it's reducing that overall kinetic energy. We have a little bit of splash here. I think some of that's coming from around the periphery here, but it's reducing the energy there versus something that's bare. So we've got a lot more splash where we have more bare soil, and that kind of makes intuitive sense. But look at how much runoff we have here. Just a little tiny bit there. And then what's the clarity of that water? It's not too bad. It's not too bad. So let's go to the soybean field. Okay. We've got a little bit more runoff here. What's our water quality there? Okay. What's traveling with that water? It's the fines in the soil. Okay. And those fine particles, those silts and clays, are where we have that those nutrients attaching to. Okay, that's where those nutrients attach, and they ride. We're gonna have daddy long legs in there. That's what's riding with that. And so when we lose this off of a site, we're not only losing water, but we're also losing a lot of nutrients there with it.
Have you tested that?
Not specifically. And each sample is going to be different, but we just know from other research coming off of collecting runoff that could be high, and particularly phosphorus is a big one. So, and it can also be nitrates. Okay, so look at how much runoff we had here in the bare field. Well over an inch on that bare field, and look at our water quality. We go to our heavy continuous grazed pasture. Obviously that had the most runoff on. Historically, a lot of times we thought that, wow, we just got a green perennial cover on there, we're good to go as far as runoff and water quality. But I think the Rainfall Simulator, and having seen dozens of these, this is often what we see on continuous grazed pasture. The ability of that to be a mediating impact on water quality on the landscape is not what we once thought. And then let's go to a managed grazed pasture. Okay, yes, we have some runoff on there, but look at that water quality. Which one would you rather have in your cup for lunch if you had to choose? Which one do you think, if we're filling ponds for our livestock, we'd rather have? What's going to give us better animal performance? Okay. All right. Let's set these in front. I'm going to have to put the mic down. Let's take this off. Screw this one, don't we? Yeah. Someone just wants. Got it. All right, let's look at infiltration. This is the amount of water that went through. Okay. So here's our ryegrass. And again, that's indicative of what's going into our groundwater. That's our runoff from our ryegrass. Okay. Put those two together. Here's our soybean field. We had some infiltration and we had some runoff. Here's our fallow field.
Now this might be a little different just because there was quite a few cracks in the soil.
Yeah,
I don't know if you would have that typically.
But there is some here. And we're going to do something else with this in a little bit. Here's our continuous graze. There's just a little bit of infiltration. Compare that to our managed graze. Okay, so we've been in a drought situation for weeks, if not months now. Which site is going to be able to capture and store the most water, and which site is going to recover quicker from the drought? I'll let you be the judge with that. So our management does have impact, it does have influence. Let's pull the tarp over here. Let's see if we can put it right in front. With our paired jars. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take these pans off and we're going to flip these samples over so you can actually see, because a lot of times in these demos, because of the cracks, and you'll get some seepage around the edge on these samples. If we flip it over, now we can truly see how much water really infiltrated on that site. So
Do them one at a time.
yeah, let's go one at a time. Okay, seepage in certain spots, still somewhat dry, but a lot of that's soaking through. That's our continuous graze. A little bit of a difference there, isn't there? Fallow sort of flaps all out. There was some infiltration, and that could be related to the dryness. Then we have our soybean field. Thank you. That's our soybean field and our ryegrass field. Very interesting. Look at the infiltration there. It's wet more of the way through. A lot of this water here, just because it's so dry, just get captured on the top. One of the things we're also looking at is soil aggregation. What's soil aggregation? Well, it's this crumbly, I'll break this apart. Oh, we got some plating here. This is interesting. So plating is where we have horizontal layers of soil in there. Where was the other one? This one had some too. Our soybean field. We don't see a lot of this more cottage cheese type structure. That works. This cottage cheese structure, and we want to see, this is the continuous graze field. We had a lot of runoff on that, but we do have some aggregates forming. This has probably been in pasture for a long time, I would imagine. Does anybody know the history of this field? So that's sort of crumbly. Was pretty dry. Where we got those aggregates clinging to those roots there, that's being formed by biological glues in the soil. Two major sources of that are, number one, the fungi. The fungi emit a sticky substance called glomalin, and that forms the sand, silts, and clays then form together in different size aggregates. Also, the bacteria. There are bacteria that move in and out of the root hair tips, and bacteria by nature is a sticky substance. That's why when they tell us to wash our hands with soap and water, it's because the soap breaks down that sticky substance. Okay, so we want that aggregation versus having, there's some aggregation in the top here, but there's still some plating here. You see how it breaks, it fractures apart more horizontally there. Even though this is a managed graze pasture, it's still in the process of healing. That just totally collapsed and fell apart. Kind of the same with our soybeans here. It's totally collapsed. There's really no structure there. It's just sand. We're probably going to see some aggregation and healing. Boy, these samples are dry. A little bit of aggregation. You can see some aggregate forming, clinging to the roots right there. And we get the bulk of our aggregation from grasses. But we need a diversity of plants on the site. This is a monoculture. We need a diversity of plants on the site to build diversity in soil biological function. And so what we like to see is representatives from each of the plant functional groups. That's going to be grasses, legumes, broadleaves, and woodies. That stimulates different functional groups in soil biology, which allows for better nutrient cycling. Okay? So yes, this is a grass. Yes, we've got some aggregate forming. Yes, there's some huge benefits in it. Thus the importance of a cool season grass and a rotation, but it doesn't answer all of our questions. But we can see by flipping this over how these different soil samples, a lot of it infiltrated around on some of these samples around the edge, just around the edge. Others it's more uniform. Some of these are in a different scale or state of recovery. And all of these things together demonstrate how our management will influence things like water quality and our ability to recover from drought. So feel free, unless you got questions, feel free, come up and have a look. Do you have anything else you want to add, Mike, to that?
No, I don't think I have anything to add, but yeah, if there's any questions, I see a question there in back.
Yeah. Some places they have graphs on, the force that rain